Thank you. All right. So good evening, everybody, and welcome to our August workshop here. Um, for those who are joining live and in person, or live and virtually, we're not in person, but those who are live and virtual, we did run into some technical difficulties that we're working through. Mike Brenner, who is our speaker, who will be taking over here shortly, is on the road and having a little bit of computer issues, but largely with the sound. So we've managed to cobble together a solution here where we should be able to hear Mike okay, and we're trying to figure out the audio that he had built into his presentation. So he's going to get started, and we may have to switch screens partway through here to keep it rolling. But he's in the process of getting me his file, and actually it just came through, Mike, so I might be able to download it now. But in the meantime, I wanted to do some introductions, get this started, and get those of you who are here live out of the waiting room. So on that note, thank you all. Again, my name is Josh Mayleaf. I am the president and one of the founders of L&D Philly. And this presentation in particular, we brought in because I think it's very relevant to a lot of the work that we all do right now. And also, I saw this for those of you who are involved with Philadelphia SHRM, you may have seen some information about this months ago because this is an encore presentation of something that they did at their conference. And based on talking to Mike and the reception he got, I thought it would also be a really good fit for our audience here. For those of you who don't know Mike, he's a former board member of L&D Philly. We actually both served on the ATD Philadelphia board years ago as well. So I've known Mike for, geez, Mike, it's been over a decade, I think. You know, Mike brings a lot to spends a lot to our profession. I've seen him speak multiple times on a variety of topics, usually in the leadership development realm. And now that we have another generation entering the workforce, I think it's becoming even more relevant for leaders to understand how to communicate across generations, as well as those people in those generations are becoming leaders in our organizations as well. So being able to support their needs and understand what some of the differences are, I think is really critical and important. And so that was my basic of this. And Mike, I do have the presentation now. So I think what I can do here is I'm going to try to share it. All right. And bear with me one sec. So we can get it going. And from the start, we can just present. I'm going to just need you to tell me when you want me to advance stuff, basically. But let me share my screen and make sure I share my audio. Well, the funny thing is, I'm not. Oh, there it is. Share sound. All right. Do that. And you know what? Hold on. I got to fix one thing. All right. So are you guys seeing the screen? Mike, can you hear us?
I see it.
You know, I'm not sure. Let me make sure. Mike, can you see the screen and everything? Yeah.
Yes, I can.
We're not hearing you coming through though, because you're muted through the computer right now.
So people can't hear me through the phone?
I'm only hearing you through my phone right now. You have to unmute on your side. I know, you have to unmute the computer.
I can't.
You should have a
Should have a
pop-up.
pop-up.
There you
How
go.
about now? How about now?
There we go.
Well, this is like Apollo 13.
A little bit. Let me turn that back off then. So I think
Hi,
we're
everybody.
good now for you to present, Mike. So yeah, I'm going to turn it over to you. Thank you for everybody for helping us fight through our technical difficulties. Again, I'm going to be here to advance slides for you, Mike, and hopefully the audio all works now. And I'm looking forward to enjoying the rest of the presentation. So take it away, Mike. Can you still hear us? Oh,
Yes, we
Sorry,
do,
Mike,
Mark.
go. I was talking to you, you couldn't hear me. Go ahead,
Nope.
get started.
All right, folks. We're obviously patching this program together tonight with bubble gum and rubber bands for technical reasons that we don't need to go into right now with everybody. But I want to thank Josh and Lindsay for the hanging in there, and I'm going to be kind of flying blind here tonight. The most important thing is that you can hear me and that you can hear the audio that's embedded in the slides. So we've created a few contraptions here to do the best we can. Part of the problem is I'm not actually at home now. I'm in Washington, D.C. in a hotel, so that's not helping. But let's get to it. Thank you all for coming on board here. We love L&D Philly, and we love Josh. We love Lindsay. We love everybody. And we love all of you who have taken the time to join me for unlocking the genius of Gen Z, 7 facts and 3 myths you need to know. You're going to hear me say next throughout this program because Josh is actually he's actually driving the boat tonight. So hopefully everyone will be patient and tolerant, and we'll have some fun tonight. So I have a Gen Z daughter. She just turned 13 earlier this year. Frankly, I wasn't particularly interested in Gen Z, and there are other things that I was more interested in until I kept reading about this generation and about how we should be anticipating their entrance into the workplace and all of their different preferences and demands and requirements. And as somebody who is in the learning and development sandbox and works with a lot of clients who are dealing with the introduction of young people into their workplaces, I thought it behooved me, well, maybe I should be learning a little bit about this generation so that I can best help my clients. And so out of that came this program. So since it's a little unorthodox the way we're running this tonight, if you have any comments or questions, please put it in the chat. Fortunately, the chat seems to be operational, and I'm going to actually be asking you some questions and asking you to engage with the chat. So, by the way, I'm Mike Brenner. I run Right Forward Leadership, which is a leadership and team development company out of Delaware County, Broomall to be exact. And I know a lot of you on the call here. So once again, thank you. Josh, if you could advance to the next slide. All right. Well, we're about to meet Generation Z. Some of you may already be familiar with folks in this generation. We're going to define who Generation Z is a moment, but I just wanted to say that if we were conducting this program in the UK, and you can go to the next slide, we would be referring to them as Generation Z, right? Or maybe in Canada, Z. But here in the good old US of A, we do refer to them as Generation Z, coming on the heels of the Millennials, or Generation Y, who came on the heels of Generation X, who came on the heels of Baby Boomers, et cetera, et cetera. Next slide, please. So as I said a moment ago, we were going to define the years that Generation Z typically fall into. And you'll see different years depending on different studies that you look at. But generally speaking, it's accepted that Gen Z, folks that belong to Gen Z were born between the years 1997 and 2012. You no doubt know a few Gen Zers. You may have some as children or grandkids, or may work with them or have them as neighbors or nephews or nieces. Very, very unique generation with a lot of very interesting characteristics and qualities, which we're going to get into tonight. Next, please. So before we go any further, I want you to think about a word or two or a short phrase that comes to mind when you think of Gen Z. What are some, right off the top of your head, words, phrases, adjectives, descriptors? I'm seeing innovative. I'm seeing social justice oriented. I'm seeing TikTok. What else? Hooked on social media, no restrictions, tech focused, Any others? Can we get one or two more? Sometimes trouble with taking initiatives, texting, not calling. Okay, so empathetic. I'm seeing some positive, neutral, and leaning maybe just a little bit negative. If we look at positive, innovative, social justice oriented, empathetic, inclusive, I think we would put that in the plus column. Neutral, TikTok, it's kind of neutral. Tech focused, kind of neutral. And then maybe leaning a little bit negative, we would see, sometimes trouble with taking initiative. Texting, not calling could potentially be negative. Hooked on social media might be negative. So, I've asked hundreds of people this question, and you kind of get this sort of spread among the positive, neutral, and negative. So my goal tonight is really to share the highlights or the greatest hits, if you will, of what I learned about Gen Z and give you an opportunity to sort of process that and think about, well, what does this mean for you, regardless of how you might be interacting with folks from that generation, whether you're their boss, their colleague, etc. Okay, next slide, please. So I want to mention, I think it's important that what I'm going to be sharing with you tonight is not representative of every Gen Zer. We're looking at very broad trends and patterns in the research, hundreds of millions of individuals. So if you're thinking, well, my nephew's a Gen Zer and he doesn't subscribe to those characteristics. Yes, it's very hard to come up with qualities and characteristics for such a large generation. That's true for everybody. So just keep in mind, in the research I looked at, these are patterns and trends that are typical of this generation. Next. One more. And this is not a comprehensive program, obviously. I mean, if we covered every quality, characteristic, a trait, and idiosyncrasy of Gen Z, we would be here till tomorrow. So this is just, like I said, the greatest hits. I think I said 3 myths and 7 facts you need to know. And I think that's a good start for anybody looking to learn a little bit more about this generation. Next, please. So let's play a little trivia game as we get warmed up here tonight. 68.6 million. What does this number represent with regard to Gen Z? What do you think? Put your answers in the chat. $68.6 million. Well, Ms. Mayleaf is first in with how many there are in that age group. No wait, she writes. Matt says TikTok videos created. Tracy says that seems wrong. Well, I will tell you, if Josh advances one slide, that is correct. Well, as the number of Gen Zs living in the US. So, Tracy, your initial instincts were correct. Next slide, please. True or false? Gen Z is the most ethnically and racially diverse generation in history. What do you think? Tracy first in with true. Any other thoughts? Mark is true. Sharon is true. Deborah is true. Colleen is true. Well, the trues have it. That is, in fact, true. Yes. And we'll be talking more about that shortly. Next slide, please. 10 years old. What is the significance of 10 years old with regard to Gen Z? Well, I don't think we have to go any further there because Tracy bing, 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 is correct once again. It is the age when the average Gen Zer received his or her first mobile phone. And Mark comes in with the silver medal with their emotional IQ, which may in fact be true in some cases. Excellent. Tracy taking the lead here. Next slide, please. Okay, another true or false. While salary is the most important factor in deciding on a job, Gen Z values salary less than every other generation. True or false? So we're not saying they don't value it. We're just saying they value it less than every other generation, or the research is suggesting that. We got some trues trickling in. Got another true. Mark says false. Well, Mr. Spool, you are incorrect. That is true. That is true. Interesting statistic about Gen Z, but it was quite clear in the research that I saw. Next slide, please. 7 hours and 18 minutes. This one shouldn't be that difficult. 7 hours and 18 minutes. What's the significance? I see how long they spend online daily. I see workday, time on phone, their workday. Any other thoughts? Average sleep time per day. Okay, these are very creative answers, but the correct answer is the average daily screen time of Gen Zers. So I don't quite understand how they go to school, do their homework, eat dinner, and still find 7 hours and 18 minutes on average to spend interacting with screens. Remarkable. Next one, please. Another true or false. More than half of Gen Z employees are ambivalent or not engaged at work, which the research suggests is higher than any other generation. And that should be a period after generation, not a comma. True or false? The most ambivalent, disengaged generation since we started keeping records on such things. Jennifer with a true, Colleen with a true, Mark once again with a false. Mr. Schumann with a false. Well, gentlemen, the ladies have it because that is in fact true. We're going to talk a little bit about why that might be and what are the implications of that. Next slide, please. Okay, so we're starting to get a sense for Gen Z, but I have a few more facts for you. And Josh, you can kind of just forward through these fairly quickly. They are the most stressed out generation. They are more likely to report being anxious, depressed, and distressed than any other generation. They're most likely of all generations to report poor mental health. They are experiencing falling levels of trust for virtually all institutions, government, academic, corporate, you name it. And they are experiencing a phenomenon called money dysmorphia, which I saw defined as a distorted feeling of insecurity around finances. So what's happening here is they are spending a lot of time on Instagram, a lot of time on TikTok. They're seeing these so-called influencers who are living the life, making videos from exotic locales, wearing the trendiest clothes, driving the trendiest cars. And even though, you know, they're not destitute, a lot of Gen Zers are looking at these influencers and going, why don't I have what they have? And they're feeling, you know, they're feeling a little discomfort and insecure around their finances, even though that feeling is distorted. So interesting. Next slide, please. Oh, and many feel badly about themselves due to exaggerated beauty standards on social media, which goes hand in hand with the money dysmorphia. So there's some body dysmorphia to go along with the money dysmorphia. Now, let's play Can You Guess the Gen Z Lingo? Number one, fire. Okay, stop there. What does, and you don't have to put it in the chat, just write it. You can write it down on a piece of scrap paper. When Gen Zer says fire, I mean, you can put it in the chat if you want, but you can also just, you know, make a note of it on a piece of paper. Whoa, that's fire. All right, next one, please, Josh. Amazing. How many said amazing? Or all, Matt said awesome. Did you get that right? Right. So something that's fire is amazing. Next one, please. Hundo P. You can put on the chat or on a piece of paper your guess as to what Hundo P means. which I had never heard of. Tracy says $100. She's close. Give you another 10 seconds. So Hundo P actually means in Gen Z lingo, 100%. Good, right. So the Gen Xer is going to attempt some Gen Z language and saying, are you going to go to that party? It's going to be fire. And the other one responds, oh, Hundo P. Now you Gen Zers out there can let me know how I did. Capping. Is he capping? I'm not sure if he's capping. All right, I see Mr. Schumann, lying, fake or false. Thanks, Colleen. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Capping means lying, not telling the truth. Yo, man, I think he's capping. I don't know how that came to mean lying, but it does. Next one, flex. Look at that guy. Look at that guy trying to flex, man. That's a pretty lame flex. Man, I sound old. Tracy is a very fast typist. Yo, man, that isn't the flex you think it is. Love it. Tracy's 100% correct because it does mean showing off. Excellent. One more. Thirsty. And no, it does not mean desiring fluids. Thirsty. Yo, she's so thirsty. Variation could be thirst trap, which you can Google yourself. As Tracy says, yes, I can't think of the nice term. That's right. Matt says overeager, and he's in the ballpark there because the correct answer is desperately craving attention. Good. All right. Well, only you know how well you did speaking Gen Z, but congratulations to those of you who got at least four correct. Let's think about some shaping events of Gen Z. And once again, Josh, you can kind of just hit return through these. Right? Instagram, George Floyd. I won't read all these out loud. Smartphones, student loan debt, streaming, AI, climate change, YouTube, gun violence, COVID. Right? This is an incredibly momentous. There are many momentous events that are hallmarks of Gen Z's life, and as you might imagine, all of them have had some kind of influence, some kind of impact on how Gen Z thinks, on how they act, and how they show up at work. So I just wanted to share this slide to kind of crystallize what Gen Z has experienced in their short lifetimes. Next, please. Okay, now that I think we have a very clear notion of what Gen Z is about, how they talk, what they may be up against, let's take a minute or two to dispel some common myths. And the first myth is that they're lazy, they lack discipline, and they don't want to work. And I saw this over and over in the research that I did, and I am going to say no. Now, once again, might you meet a lazy Gen Z who is, doesn't want to work? Sure, they're out there. But as a whole, in talking to Gen Zers and researching Gen Z, I do think this is a myth. I think that with some exceptions, generally they are ambitious, they are goal-oriented, they are driven, they know what they want, and many of them are quite fearless in going after their career goals. Number two, they are selfish, entitled, and arrogant. I hear that label put on them quite a bit. And once again, I do not think that they are selfish and arrogant. I think that they are confident. I think that they are confident about what they bring to the table, about their skills, about the various ways that they bring value to companies. And that can often come off as arrogant. It can often be perceived as selfish. but that definitely was not the vibe I got from the Gen Zers I spoke to. So I think that self-confidence is often misconstrued as arrogance. So I think it's a myth. Our third and final myth, that they are addicted to and obsessed with technology. Now, you might be thinking, well, that's not a myth. I mean, clearly Gen Z is addicted to and obsessed with technology, but I would argue that that is a myth. I don't sense that they're addicted and obsessed. I think that I sense that they are very adept at technology. They're the first generation, they call them digital natives. In other words, like they might as well have been born with a smartphone in their hand. I mean, they're incredibly adept at technology. They're incredibly adept at using technology to facilitate work, to facilitate social interactions, to communicate. I guess you could, if you want to label that as an addiction or an obsession, you can certainly do that. But I don't like the negative connotation. I prefer really, keep coming back to that word adept, very skilled at leveraging technology to do some very, very interesting things. So I don't subscribe to the negative connotation that comes with addiction and obsession. Next, please. Okay, so I think you can click again, Josh. You might respond by saying, but Mike, isn't the iconic symbol of Gen Z the selfie, right? Thus proving that they are obsessed and addicted to technology. And I must say that if I had to choose one prevailing image from the internet that seems to represent Gen Z, it would in fact be the selfie. So I concede that point. Nevertheless, I think there is much more to Gen Z and their relationship with technology than just making goofy faces. Next, please. So bottom line for me, in my research, what I learned about Gen Z, I think that they are, and you can just roll through these, Josh, tech savvy, progressive, open-minded, creative, entrepreneurial, diverse, ambitious, socially conscious, independent, adaptable, collaborative, talented, opinionated bunch of badasses. And you'll forgive my PG-13 rated language, but man, they're bad, man. And I don't mean the bad. I mean the bad meaning good bad. They are sharp. They are ambitious. They are impressive. And my hope is that will come through in this presentation tonight. They are brat. Yes, I love that. I have to maybe work that into the next iteration of this workshop. So if, in fact, they are technologically savvy, progressive, open-minded, creative, entrepreneurial, diverse, ambitious, socially conscious, independent, adaptable, collaborative, talented, opinionated badasses, why is it that so many older generations feel differently about them? So, Josh, if you could go to this gentleman, I'm hoping that you can hear this gentleman if you press play.
Ever since the pandemic, I've been noticing the youth today.
Is his voice coming through?
The teenagers and the people in their
great, because I can't hear it.
They don't really care so much about working. They don't put no passion into the jobs that they do. And I understand it because they get it. The jig is up. When it comes to jobs, the jig is up. They understand you can't get rich off no job. They understand these jobs don't care about you. And pretty much everybody's replaceable. So it's they don't really too much care to be there. And it shows in their performance. When they give you customer service, it's so dry. It's so minimal. You know what I mean? You'll catch employees on their phones, in their phones, staring in space. They don't want to smile. They don't want to greet you. They're just dry with their whole, I don't know. It's they don't care to be there. They don't care about how you feel about your service. They're not treating you how they would love to be treated. But let it be a flip side to where they're the customer. Oh, they're gonna want to blow up for how they're being treated. If they were to get the same treatment, they would want to blow up. But it's like, I don't know. I kind of blame management, and I kind of
So Josh, just for the sake of time, you can pause this. I think you get the idea, even though I can't hear the video, but I suspect that you're getting the point. This young gentleman is saying, these Gen Zers, they don't want to work. They're lazy. They don't have the same sort of service attitude that older generations have. And, he basically goes on that rant for another minute or two. So I guess my question for all of you in the chat is, why do so many older folks feel that way about Gen Z? If I'm proposing here tonight that all of those positive attributes that I discovered about Gen Z, why do we still have so much of this sort of attribution going on? So if you have some thoughts about the answer or the question on the screen, just put them in the chat. Why is there such a disconnect between reality and perception, I guess is a good way to put it. All right, let's quickly take a look at the chat. I think they communicate differently and us olds don't understand. Yeah, that's a big piece of it. We're going to talk about that. People can wind up hating something they fear, don't understand. Gen Z very much lives in a fast-paced present, right? So we tend to denigrate things that we're on the outside of, perhaps, that we don't fully understand. They set boundaries that previous generations did not. I think that might have something to do with it. Each generation says the same thing about one or two generations before them. Somebody else pointed that out the other day. They're like, there's nothing new under the sun. The previous generations said that about each succeeding generation. That is true. I think there's some truth to that. And Sharon says infrequent interactions could lead to this perception. It takes time to develop a relationship with them. That is certainly true. Yeah, a Josh person might refer to them as cohort groups rather than generation. Interesting. Deborah says, when interacting with them, this is the reality of how they show up. Yeah, I mean, let's not dismiss this gentleman's point of view. Maybe he has come across a lot of Gen Zs that fit the stereotypical lazy, apathetic, don't want to work hard. I don't want to discount his lived experience, but I don't think it's illustrative of the generation as a whole. Dimer says, perhaps because Gen Z prioritizes meaningful work and older generations are used to just doing the job and not feeling like purpose is as high priority in work. Another excellent perspective. So next slide, please.
Ever since the
Okay, so this is just, a lot of you know that I'm a musician. I just want to present a metaphor here tonight that might be useful. These are some old photos. That's a much more recent photo, right? Next slide. So these are, for those of you musically inclined, probably know what these are. These are called chords, which are a series of notes played at the same time. And this is not a webinar on music theory, but I just wanted to share this with you because I think it's kind of a neat metaphor. And one of the things that I'm always asking my clients is the following question, what chords are you playing? And I think that's especially important question when you talk about Gen Z and some of the comments you put in chat. When you're talking about, prioritizing meaning in work or fighting for and making, progress that older generations tried to, but couldn't, or communicating differently, or, it really comes down to the chords we play. So if the chords we play are out of tune, then we're not going to have positive, fulfilling, satisfying interactions with Gen Z. But if the chords we play are in harmony, and we continue to learn about them and meet them halfway and try to create workplaces where they feel valued, appreciated, and recognized, then then we can experience some success. So just to put a finer point on it, when when it comes to managing or working with members of Gen Z, it really comes down to the chords that we play. So it's just a nifty metaphor based in my musical background that I use all the time. So when you go out and you deal with the Gen Zers in your life, think about the chords you play and whether they're in tune or out of tune. So next slide. You can move past this. These are just the different notes in the chord. All right, so let's talk about fact number one. What I discovered in researching Gen Z and in speaking with Gen Z, and you're going to hear some of those video edits shortly. One of the key things that really came to the surface for me is that Gen Z places a huge premium on flexibility, autonomy, and work-life balance. All right, next slide. And Josh, this is just a build, so you can move through these. They believe flexible work arrangements are crucial to their quality of work experience. They are pushing back on so-called hustle culture that encourages long hours, you know, and they're not about it. You know, they'll put in the work, but they truly value having a life as well. So they're going to be less willing, perhaps, than previous generations to, you know, to work the long hours that previous generations probably just kind of took for granted. And interestingly, I read that they're actually turning down promotions to managerial positions because those managerial positions, if they require, you know, those extra hours or you know, the doing, you know, more than what they feel they would be fairly compensated for, then they're actually turning down those managerial positions, which really flies in the face of what previous generations would do, right? It was all about moving up the corporate ladder. It's not about that for these young folks these days. You know, it's about quality of life, quality of work experience, and that's really important. So if we go to the next slide, you're going to hear from Robbie. He's a son of a client of mine, and let's hear what Robbie has to say on this point.
And flexibility is super important in terms of being able to work remote or come in at various hours and make jobs more quota based. So if I finish my work at 3, I don't have to hang out till 5, like watching a clock hand move in circles. Yeah, I definitely think the majority of autonomous work and majority of work in general can be done from home. But I do definitely understand and see the need for going into the office for like large meetings or presentations or anything that really needs hands-on group work, I think should be done in person. But anything that you're either doing by yourself or 1 or 2 people, there's no reason to have to go into the office for that.
Would you be, you know, let's say there was a job opportunity that required you to be in the office 5 days a week. Is that something you would ever even consider? Or
Yeah,
is that, would that be a, you know, a deal breaker?
I'd be fine with it as long as they kind of, back to that flexibility piece, weren't making me stay there. I have to be in at 9 o'clock and I cannot get up from my chair until 5 o'clock. As long as there's still flexibility, then I'm 100% fine going into the office 5 days a week. Wouldn't prefer it, but I'd do it.
Okay, now I couldn't hear Robbie, but I've seen that clip many times.
And flexibility.
The first core that you should be thinking about if you're a business owner, if you are a manager or supervisor of Gen Z, is that if you're going to retain these folks, it's important to create work environments that are flexible. We can't be so stringent and strict, you know, clock in at 9, sit at your desk for 8 hours, you know, clock out at whatever and come in and do it again. I mean, they're not about that. And, you know, it doesn't mean it has to be a free for all. I think it has to be a conversation, because it can't just be, you know, anything goes. There are no rules if you're going to lean into this flexibility thing, but it needs to be a conversation. And I just know that it's something that they really, they'll evaluate a prospective employer, one of the factors at least on how flexible the work arrangement is. So that's chord number one we should be thinking about. Next slide, please.
And flexibility is super important.
Let's hear from Asha. She is a Gen Zer. She was a former student of mine, and she now works at Gallup in Washington, D.C. Let's see what Asha has to say.
Yeah, so I actually did ask about that flexibility piece in my final round interview, and the regional director was essentially saying they've done like a 3 day in the office type of thing instead of the 5. And, like he explained that people really love it. And, that's something that I haven't done before. So at first I was a little hesitant, but going every day and seeing how truly flexible it is, I've spoken to some associates and they said that even though he said it's a 3 day in the office, he said he meant it really loosely and casually. So sometimes people won't even come in on the Thursday. Some people only do twice a week. I spoke to someone that didn't come into work the whole week last week, and now they've been in the office for a few days. So it's actually cool to see how laid back and flexible they really are, just as long as you're getting your work done. Yeah, so
Okay, so just take a moment to sort of absorb that and think about, one of the things I may need to do as a leader, as a business owner to attract and retain Gen Z is think about, flexibility in a way that maybe hasn't been, on my radar previously. I think that's important. Next slide, Josh. Fact number 2. Very high interest in diversity, equity, and inclusion. Someone mentioned that in the chat earlier. Next slide, we'll kind of peel this one apart for a minute. So they are prioritizing diversity across race, gender, ethnicity, and orientation. Very, very important to this generation. They're all about respecting individuality, valuing every voice, and creating a keen sense of belonging, no matter what your predilections might be. And they're all about seeking diversity, not just of traditional categorizations like race and gender, but of ideas, diversity of ideas, experiences, perspectives, and backgrounds. That is something that really fuels this generation and that they find to be very invigorating and stimulating. And they are looking for that again in their, at their employers. So let's take a look at our next Gen Zer, Laura, who is a sophomore at Wesleyan University. And let's see what she has to say on this issue of diversity.
A company that, in today's day and age, I do think incorporating as many diverse perspectives as possible. And I think diversity looks like a lot of different things. I don't think it just means race. I don't think it just means gender, but it means a breadth of experiences. And so those other factors might be part of it. But maybe, going from a wide pool, hiring people that you might not have expected to hire, who might bring new ideas, fresh blood in an industry that might have been long established. I think that's very important to me. And I think also making real changes that are tangible, and not just talking a big game without doing anything.
So disconcerting not to be able to hear the video, but that's what we're dealing with tonight. So, I mean, as a Gen Xer myself, I've had to pivot a little bit too. Like I've had Gen Zers come up to me after programs and say, Mike, that was a really great session or a great workshop. Can I give you a little feedback? And I say, sure. And they're like, you should probably include some more, people of color in your slide deck or women of color. And it's certainly not intentional, but it's not first thing on my mind when I'm designing a slide presentation. But I appreciate that because I'm learning as an older person, what's important to this young generation, and seeing themselves represented in something like, a leadership program or something is really important to them. And it should be. It should be. So, that was a big learning for me. Next slide, please. Okay, so diversity, they're looking for that, not only in race, ethnicity, gender, but also in ideas, perspectives, very important. Fact number 3, and this one is also critical, and I think Damarit's mentioned this earlier in the chat, they value work with a purpose. They value work with a purpose. You might be thinking, well, Mike, doesn't every generation value work with a purpose? And I would answer in the affirmative, but I think it's especially critical for young people. Josh, if you go to the next slide, we'll peel this one apart a little bit. So interestingly, I saw a statistic that 3/4 of Gen Zers rank purpose as more important than salary. Think about that. I mean, that just was not the case. And for my generation or my parents' generation, I mean, I suppose we wanted meaning in the work, but it certainly didn't compete for salary as things that were important to us. But a lot of Gen Zers will forego a salary or a high salary if it means, the work doesn't connect for them, or they're not fully invested in the work. That's really important to them. Next. So Gen Z forms opinions based on values, ethics, business practices, and social impact of their prospective employers. So they're looking at mission statements, they're looking at values, they're looking at sustainability programs, they're looking at not-for-profit activities, and they are deciding whether or not they want to work for these companies based on these factors. And I don't recall those being things that were on my radar when I was first starting out. And finally, for Gen Z, it's not just about advancement. I mean, everybody wants to advance in the organization and be successful, but it's about making a meaningful contribution. That came through loud and clear in the research that I saw and in the interviews that I conducted. So if you go to the next slide, Josh. So obviously, this is not somebody I interviewed. This is a video from a TED Talk. But I include it here because I think this young man does a really nice job of talking about this idea of finding meaning and purpose in the work. Let's hear it.
The highest impact way, though, that organizations can make young people feel like they're on the right track is to show them that the work they do at your organization matters. Step back once in a while to show them the bigger picture of how their work fits together towards a bigger vision or goal. Give them time to work on passion projects that are of interest to them and of value to the firm. Or go out in the community every once in a while and do some good together as a team. Regardless of how it's done, though. Organizations that show their young employees that sticking around is the best way to grow and achieve their ambitions are the ones Gen Z say they want to work for.
Okay, so I think one of the things that we can do as leaders, managers, or as learning and development practitioners for our own clients is to help them connect the dots for their young employees to the meaning of the work. And of course, young people sometimes find themselves doing, some of the more mundane work, just due to their youth and their inexperience. But I think it's incumbent upon us as practitioners and leaders and managers in general to demonstrate unequivocally, hey, your work matters. You are contributing to something important, even though it might be perceived as sort of maybe not the most intriguing work possible, but it still has inherent value. I think that's a really important message for us to give the Gen Z folks that are in our workplace. A lot of Gen Z folks are looking to entrepreneurship where they can make a meaningful contribution. So if they're not getting it from their employer, they're going to invest a fair amount of time and energy doing their own thing, which has been called a side hustle, right? So not only can they make a little extra cash, but they can scratch that meaning itch that they may not be getting from their 9-to-5 employer. And if they achieve a high level of success, they may bail on the employer and just invest all their time to their own gig. Next, please. Fact number 4, desiring growth and development opportunities. This is really, really important to Gen Z. There's a very strong desire for continuous learning and clear career paths. They expect real-time feedback and lots of it. They're not wilting flowers. They want feedback as long as it's constructive. You know, it's not intended to break them down, but they'll hear the tough messages because they are ambitious and they want to be successful. They want managers, I learned, who are invested in their growth and not just organizational growth. They really want a leader or manager or supervisor who is helping steer them through, the corporate hierarchy and giving them the tools and resources to be successful. So let's listen to another one of these Gen Zers. Forget who it is. Oh, quick word about the feedback. If you're going to deliver feedback to a Gen Zer, it should be frequent. It should be timely. Don't wait 2 weeks or 3 weeks and go, that work you did last month. No, timely, direct. What you should be having one-on-ones at least twice a month. Provide the why. So don't just tell them you need to do this better. Explain the why. I think that you will be more successful if you consider A, B, and C. And finally, if you are the type of leader or manager who is willing to welcome their feedback, I think you will be the type of leader or manager who is respected, who is trusted, and who, is just really well thought of by your young employees. Okay, so there no video for that one. A corollary to what I just shared with y'all is fact number 5. They want truthful, respectful, caring leaders. They have really limited tolerance for, lack of transparency or just feeling like they're being yanked around or not being able to get answers or lack of clarity. That really frustrates them. So let's peel this apart for a minute. Another interesting data point, they value honesty 5 times as much as years of career expertise when it comes to leaders and managers. Think about that. And you could debate, is it 5 times as much or 3 times as much or 10 times as much? That number doesn't really matter as much as recognizing that Gen Z really wants leaders who are honest, forthright, transparent, and able to have those open conversations. They seek trust and support in managers above any other quality. So that was some research that I saw that really, made an impression on me. And finally, Gen Z tends to value leaders who demonstrate integrity through consistent actions and ethical behavior. So, that's just, I don't need to embellish that or amplify that. That's just something that just came up over and over and over. So I think the next video, okay, so here's Asha again from Gallup, and listen to her talk about her manager. I think you'll find it eye-opening.
1, respectful. 2, kind.
Okay.
3, I would say really like a good advisor, like
Okay.
I feel like, the advice piece, especially starting a new role, you don't really know what you're doing, but you want to feel comfortable going to your supervisor for something. So just having that open door policy as well, I really love that. Actually today when I was leaving, I said bye to my manager. Her door was like right open. So it was really nice. Just like being able to have that connection with a manager, and then also being very kind. Like she walked with us to get coffee the other day, and it was so cool like talking to her outside of work. And like sometimes I forget that she's a manager. She just seems like a fellow associate. So it's really cool to just have that kind of relationship with someone higher than you that you respect, but then also still feel comfortable going to.
And so I believe that's the video where she talks about taking a walk with her boss to get coffee, right? And just you can just see the smile on her face and how such a seemingly small gesture was made such a big impression on her. And I spoke to, I'm guessing he was a Gen Xer today. I was doing an interview, a virtual interview with him, and he's a director of sustainability at Bristol Myers Squibb. And he was talking about the young people on his team. And I said, what's your secret sauce? His name's Devin. I said, what's your secret sauce, Devin, for successfully, managing the younger folks on your team? And he's just like, just be real, be authentic, be a human being, create psychological safety where if you make a well-intentioned mistake, it's not the end of the world. You learn from it. And, it's just like, wow, that seems just so basic, just be real, human, and authentic, but I saw that over and over, that Gen Z, members of Gen Z are really looking for those human qualities in their leaders. And maybe older generations would be willing to tolerate, these autocratic, bully type of bosses. We just kind of learn to tolerate it. I've had a few in my career, but I think Gen Z is not going to tolerate them. I think they're just gonna check out and leave. So something to think about. Next slide.
One.
Okay, fact number 6. And remember, there's only 7 of these. So we're at the penultimate fact here. Wants to be heard, valued, and respected. Next slide. So what do we mean? So what do you mean heard, valued, and respected? So despite their relative youth, it was interesting to me to hear that Gen Z does not want to be dismissed. They don't want to be discounted, and we shouldn't be. They bring an enormous amount of value to the organizations, and they're able to do things that perhaps even older folks are not as adept to do. So it is at our own peril to be dismissive of them just because of their relative youth and inexperience. So let's hear from I forget her name. I know we saw her before.
There doesn't need to be only one person at the top who's running the show and what they say goes. I think that can be very challenging. And I think, if it is a person's company, then it's something that they really enjoy, but they're bringing me on maybe because of my ideas and my experience. And if that's not going to be listened to, what's the point? I think a culture that allows you to pursue the projects that you want to pursue and not only work within the constraints of what other people are telling you to do, or at the very least, allow you to put your own spin on or make a case for why you think adding this onto their project that they proposed would be a more effective way of putting this product out, or of writing this article, or of doing this experiment, things like that. So I think a balance between, obviously, I think leadership is so important. And I think places that don't have effective leadership are often run to the ground very quickly, and everyone's sort of lost. But I think there's also an important aspect of, look, if I needed to talk to one of the jefes, I would be allowed to do that. If I had spent 2 years there and was hoping to get a promotion, I wouldn't be told no right off the bat.
I've talked to a lot of Gen Z folks who feel dismissed and discounted and devalued because of their inexperience, and they're not taken seriously. And I think that's a huge mistake. Just because they are relatively youthful or inexperienced does not by any stretch mean that they don't bring any value. In fact, they bring very specific value to the organization in terms of their technological savvy and the way they lean into social justice issues and diversity. I would try to amplify their voice, if anything. At the very least, we want to give them a seat at the table. It may be the case that we have to coach one of our Gen Z folks and say, you've only been here 3 weeks. I wouldn't go, calling the CEO with your idea. But I would say I appreciate your enthusiasm and your passion, and you might have to create some guardrails there, but I don't think that's a bad thing. We don't want to squash that inherent enthusiasm and zeal and creativity, because I think those are really important hallmarks of Gen Z overall. So creating workspaces where that is amplified and allowed a space to be considered, I think is very, very important. Next.
Or doesn't.
As far as letting our Gen Z folks know that we value them, we hear them, we appreciate them, I would boil it down to 3 key messages as follows. I see your good work. I value you. And we're going places together. So you can sort of combine that any way that you see fit, but I would try to bake those 3 messages into your overall, messaging for your young people, letting them know that you are aware of the great work they're doing, you value their contributions, and you are going somewhere important and meaningful together as a team. And I think that's going to really be rocket fuel for your Gen Z employees or your clients' employees. I'd pass that along to your clients as well. And finally, we get to fact number 7. Gen Z prioritizes mental and emotional health and well-being. Remember in the earlier slide, they're one of the most emotionally stressed and mentally stressed generations. And I shared some reasons for that in that one slide that had all of those events. Think about it. I mean, COVID is just incredibly traumatic for all of us, sure, but for Gen Z, it's just messed up their school, it messed up their work. They couldn't see their friends. I mean, and not to mention all the other things on that slide. So for those of us who are a little older, I'm not saying we don't prioritize mental and emotional health and well-being. I'm sure that we do, but these young folks really lean into that. So let's peel that apart for a second. So young adults are reporting higher stress levels than older generations for the reasons we talked about. Health and finance related concerns top their list of stressors. Shouldn't be a surprise. But other stressors include job prospects and am I making the right career choice, and personal safety, and climate change and the aftermath of COVID and possibly having to move back in with mom or dad because we can't afford to get a house, and on it goes. So in the final video here, we're going to listen to a Gen Zer talk about mental and emotional well-being. Let's check it out.
Danielle, there's been a real shift in the way we see and talk about mental health here. I'm aware of the risk that I run of sounding very old. When I entered the job market, there was this pressure of just hustling, of getting as many jobs and as much experience as you could possibly get. But now this hustle culture really is perceived as not being super healthy.
Yeah, I think at the core of it, when we hustle, we abandon taking care of our mental and physical health. And without our health, we have nothing. And when we prioritize just what makes us human and what we need in terms of rest and to refill our cup to approach our work with more energy, then it is a win-win for everybody. We take care of ourselves. Our employers have lower turnover. They have reduced healthcare costs. So I think when we reject this notion of hustle culture as our ultimate measure of worth in society, and we center quality of life as the metric that really makes us all successful, that's when the world will start to change and the workforce will start to change.
Okay, so I'm not suggesting that we should all run out and become, counselors and psychiatrists and mental health professionals. What I am suggesting is that we should be aware of this, of how much Gen Z values emotional and mental well-being, and will, evaluate a prospective employer based on the environment that has been cultivated there. And I think that if you're an older leader, older manager, this is something that we need to have on our radar. Even as a Gen Xer, and certainly my parents' generation as, older baby boomers, I don't know that much was ever talked about with regard to emotional and mental well-being. I think that's kind of something that's come about within, maybe the last 20 to 30 years or so. But it's very important that we create workspaces that honor and value some downtime, the value of taking breaks, the value of taking, mental health day. And I think that first fact, the flexibility piece, plays a big role in that. Somebody needs to go to a doctor's appointment or pick up a sick child. We want to be able to afford that flexibility because that contributes to overall emotional and mental well-being too. So in conclusion, as more boomers enter retirement, Gen Z will, of course, be replacing them, bringing an entirely different worldview and perspective on their careers and how to succeed in the workplace. So it's imperative for us to understand the forces that are shaping those views, their career aspirations, and their working styles, so that we can not only attract them, but retain them. And hopefully in, the preceding 60 minutes or so, we've just scratched the surface on some of the key factors that we should be considering. And I would strongly encourage you, if this is something you want to learn more about. I mean, there's absolutely no shortage of literature on Gen Z and how we can create workspaces where everyone feels that they can, operate at their optimal capacity. So we won't do this tonight because it's getting a little late, but what I would encourage you to think about are the following 3 questions. How can I provide my Gen Z employees with the flexibility they need to work at their best? Or if you're not a manager or leader, but you work with managers and leaders as an L&D practitioner, how can I help my clients create workplaces that are characterized by flexibility? Similarly, how can I create a team culture that Gen Z employees are excited to take part in? Or how can I help my clients create team cultures that their Gen Z employees are excited to take part in? And finally, how can I provide my Gen Z employees with the tools they need to achieve their ambitions? Or how can I help my clients provide their Gen Z employees with the tools they need to achieve their ambitions? So, hopefully these questions are provocative and things that you would be inclined to think about, or at least share with your clients. So I'll just do a quick shameless plug for my book that's coming out in the fall. It's called Strike the Right Chord, The Emerging Leader's Guide to Exceptional Performance. And it talks about a lot of the things that I've learned over a 25-year career in learning and development for helping new and emerging leaders experience success. And I hope you'll look out for that on TikTok and Instagram. I don't use TikTok or Instagram, but maybe I should. I want to thank everybody for coming in tonight and tolerating the technical issues we had. I really appreciate it. I hope you found this brief journey into the world of Gen Z invigorating and stimulating. I want to thank Josh and Lindsay. If you want to reach out to me, please do. My website is rightchordleadership.com. Don't forget the H in chord. LinkedIn profile, look for the middle initial Y, because there are a few other Michael Brenners there on LinkedIn. So Michael Y. Brenner. And if you want to, just connect via email, be happy to share anything that I can to help you be successful. Michael at rightchordleadership.com. And with my gratitude for all of you tonight, I will turn it back to Josh.
All right. So we made it through most of those tech challenges. So thank you, Mike. I'm realizing he can't hear me. So Mike, I unmuted on the phone so you can hear my closing remarks here as well. So thank you, Mike. Appreciate your time tonight. Definitely some good information here. And thank you all for hanging with us through some technical challenges to get some valuable info, and look forward to seeing everybody next time around. Night all.